unanimous consent that the Senate be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Madam President, it's been 98 days, almost 100 days, since Senate Republicans killed the toughest border security bill, the toughest bipartisan border security bill that has been before the Senate in nearly a generation. We are proud that our nation is a nation with a robust history of immigration. We know that our future involves inviting people to come to this country to seek a better life, to be part of our growing economy, to start their own businesses, to flee violence or terror or torture. We're proud of our history of immigration. We know that America only thrives in the future by committing ourselves to a future of robust immigration. But what has been happening at the border over the past several years is unsustainable. We want people to come to this country, but we cannot handle 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 people arriving on a daily basis. Our system of legal immigration is broken. People come to the United States, they apply for asylum, and they often don't get their chance to make their case for 10 years. That's not fair to those individuals, but it's also not fair to others who have been waiting outside of the United States to apply to come here. Our immigration system is outdated. It's in need of reform. Our border is under-resourced with statutes that are equally outdated. And right now, there is only one party, the Democratic Party, that is serious about adding resources to the border, about updating our outdated laws. Because it's been 98 days since a bipartisan border security bill negotiated by Senate Republicans, including Senate Republican leadership, and Senate Democrats, came to this floor and was defeated because Republicans would not vote for it. Republicans would not vote for the bipartisan border security bill, not because it was an ineffective bill. In fact, quite the opposite. Senate Republicans defeated the bill because it would be effective. Now, that doesn't make sense, right? Why would that be? Why would Senate Republicans vote against a bipartisan border security bill that would have been effective at bringing order to the southwest border? The reason is this. Republicans have decided that they don't want to solve the problem at the border. Republicans have decided that they want this issue to be outstanding. They want the border to be chaotic. They want the border to be a mess because it helps for their political purposes. It helps win an election. If the border was under control, if there were less people presenting, if it was more orderly, that would be good for the country, but that might not be good for Republican electoral prospects. And therein lies the reason that we have not had action on the bipartisan border bill. Because Democrats want to get something done, Republicans want to keep this issue open. They want to keep the border a mess for political purposes. You don't have to listen to me. Senator McConnell said it out loud. Senator Lankford said it out loud. The reason that this bill was defeated 98 days ago is because Donald Trump told Republicans that it's better for Republicans to keep this issue alive and to not change the law to secure the country. Tomorrow, I'm going to reintroduce the bipartisan border bill. And my hope is that we will bring that bill to the floor for a vote to give my Republican colleagues another chance to do the right thing, another chance to choose the safety and security of this country over the political prospects of their candidate for president. Americans want us to come together to pass border and immigration reform. They support compromise between the two parties. And that's exactly what the bipartisan border bill represented. Senator Lankford and I do not share views on the border. Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer do not share views on the border. But we all sat in a room for 4.5 months, along with Senator Sinema, in order to find a compromise that would better secure our border and create a more humane, more efficient mechanism to bring people into this country legally. Let me just briefly talk about what this bill does, because it'll make sense to Americans when you hear it. There's nothing radical in this bill. It's common sense changes to our laws. First, it gives the president new authority to better control the border. Listen, we can't handle 10,000 people crossing a day. And so what this bill does is says that at periods of time when there are unusually high numbers of people crossing the southwest border, the president can close portions of the border, stop accepting asylum applications until the numbers are reduced to the point where our resources at the border meet the number of people who are arriving. This is a bold new power, a bold new authority for President Biden. But it's necessary because there are simply some times, some days, some weeks when the numbers are too high. The second thing this bill does is significantly reform our asylum application system. As I mentioned, you come to the southwest border, you present an application for asylum, and we are so backed up in that system that it often takes people 5 to 10 years before their claim is heard. That's not right for that individual or for the country writ large. And so this bill shortens that time frame with new laws and new resources so that instead of it taking 10 years for a migrant to have their asylum claim heard, it could now take 10 days, a few months. Now, that's the right thing to do, but it also has the effect of dramatically changing the calculus for people who are thinking about paying a trafficker $5,000, $10,000 to come to the United States. If they know that they have an illegitimate claim and it's going to be judged as illegitimate within weeks, they won't pay the $5,000 to come to the United States. Today, they might be willing to pay it because even if they have an illegitimate claim, they may get to stay in the United States for 5 or 10 years. This fundamentally changes the calculus and decreases the amount of risk that people are willing to take. But this bill also understands that we should have more legal pathways to come to the United States. And when people come to the United States and are waiting to have their claims heard, they shouldn't be living in the shadows. And so this bill also increases the number of work and family visas by 250,000 over the course of 5 years to allow more legal, planful pathways for people to come to the United States. The bill also allows for individuals who arrive at the border to get immediate work authorizations in most cases so that while their application is pending, they can work, so that you don't have the situation we have today where people are being warehoused in homeless shelters, in hotels, without the ability to work while they're waiting for their claim to be processed. And this bill does create some pathways for individuals who are here today to become citizens. In particular, our Afghan partners who fought with us, who stood with us in Afghanistan, under this bill get the opportunity to become American citizens, and the children of high-tech workers that are here on temporary visas who might have been born outside of the United States but were raised here in the United States, they get a chance to stay here as well. That's just a handful of the changes in the bill that enhance protections and benefits for individuals who are awaiting for the determination of their claim to be processed. But the combination of these changes, the new authorities at the border, the emergency authority, the new asylum system, combined with some new protections for individuals who are coming to the United States, it represents a true compromise between Republicans and Democrats, between right and left. It's exactly what the American people want. And so my hope is that our Republican colleagues have had the chance to rethink their vote from several months ago. My hope is that Republicans will decide to do the right thing for the country, the right thing for the border. We negotiated this bill at the request of Republicans. The chief Republican negotiator, Senator Lankford, was chosen by the Republican conference. Senator McConnell and his staff were in the room for all of those negotiations. But Republicans voted against it, with the exception of 4 of our colleagues, for one reason and one reason only. President Trump said it would be better for Republicans to keep this issue open, to keep the border a mess, better for Republican presidential and congressional campaign prospects. So tomorrow, I will reintroduce this legislation. I don't expect it'll get every single Democratic vote, because it's a true compromise. But I expect it will get enough Democratic votes that if half of the Senate Republican caucus votes for it, it will pass. And we'll be a step closer to doing what America wants. Continuing our tradition of robust legal immigration, building upon our tradition as a country founded upon immigration, but doing it in a legal way and creating a much more orderly system at the border. That's what America wants. Keep our system of legal immigration, get the border under control. The bipartisan border bill does both of those things. And my hope is that we can come together and Republicans will choose this country and border security over the political prospects of their presidential candidate, Donald Trump. I'm glad to be joined on the floor by a number of my Democratic colleagues today to talk about the importance of this measure, the chance the Senate has to act in a bipartisan way on border security. And with that, I'll yield the floor.
Madam President.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
And I thank my colleagues. I'll be brief. I want to thank my friend Senator Murphy for bringing us to the floor this evening to talk about the need to fix our southern border with bipartisan action. Senator Murphy did outstanding work earlier this year, along with Senators Sinema and Lankford and others, by doing what many thought impossible, producing a real, necessary, and bipartisan border bill. When our bill was first released, a lot of our Republican colleagues were surprised with how strong it was. But then, as we all know, Donald Trump came barging in and told his MAGA supporters to kill the bill. Democrats have not walked away from this issue. We believe if you're going to call something an emergency, then we cannot wait to act. We hope, despite Republicans' opposition a few months ago, that our colleagues are willing to join us to secure the border, as they said they've wanted to do. After all, how many times have we heard from our Republican colleagues through speeches, press conferences, letters, that fixing the border, quote, cannot wait. They said it cannot wait. Well, we don't want to wait any longer. Just listen to the words from the other side, going back years, about the need to act. Quote, the crisis requires swift, serious, and substantive action, unquote. That was what my colleague from Wyoming said recently. Or how about this? The time to act on it is yesterday. That's what Speaker Mike Johnson said, standing at the border at the beginning of this year. Or how about the words of Donald Trump? Tonight, I am asking you to defend our very dangerous southern border out of love and devotion to our fellow citizens and to our country. That is what Donald Trump said in his 2019 State of the Union address. And you know what? Democrats agree. Congress should act. We believe the status quo cannot continue. But here's the thing. The only real long-term solution to the southern border is bipartisan legislation. That's the only way you get things done around here, bipartisan. Bipartisan legislation like the bill we had here in the Senate 3 months ago. Bipartisan legislation like the one we wrote to hire thousands of more border agents and thousands of more asylum officers and invest billions to stop the flow of fentanyl and other drugs. The conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board, hardly a friend of this side of the aisle, here's what they said. They said, quote, a border bill worth passing, unquote. The head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce called it, quote, a common sense measure. And maybe most importantly, the president of the National Border Patrol Council, a union extremely conservative, very close with President Trump, called it, quote, far better than the status quo, unquote. I asked my Republican colleagues, if a border security bill was good enough to win the support of actual border agents, shouldn't it have been good enough to win the support of the Republican Senate? If we want to fix asylum and stop fentanyl and hire more agents, shouldn't we pass a bill that actually fixes asylum, stops fentanyl, and hires more agents? That is precisely what our border bill would have done. That's precisely why we made such a strong push to pass it in the Senate 3 months ago. And that's precisely the bill that Donald Trump killed. In a vain attempt to gain an edge on the campaign trail, he was clear about what he did. He said, quote, please blame it on me, as if it were all a game to Donald Trump. I'm used to Donald Trump saying it. Speaker Pelosi and I were at the White House when he was thinking of shutting down the government, and he said, blame it on me. Didn't work out so well for him. It's not going to work out so well for him this time either. The American people do not have the luxury of playing partisan blame games. They want bipartisan action to secure our border. Democrats stand ready to work with Republicans to pass bipartisan border security. We hope our Republican colleagues stand ready to take action too. Madam President, I want to thank my colleagues for being here. Democrats are going to continue to pursue this issue. We believe the public agrees with us. Passing a bipartisan bill is a lot better than making a lot of speeches, doing a lot of finger pointing, and getting nothing done on the border. I again thank my colleagues. I thank Senator Murphy for his great leadership. And we have a number of our colleagues here tonight. I thank you for coming. It shows the importance we give to this issue.
Madam President.
The senator from Arizona.
Madam President, as my colleague from Connecticut said, it's been nearly 100 days since my Republican colleagues walked away from a bipartisan border security agreement. That's nearly 100 days that my state of Arizona and other border states have had to live with the consequences of that failure. We could have been on our way to hiring more than 1,000 additional Border Patrol agents and paying them better. We could have new technology to detect fentanyl and more personnel to seize those drugs, keeping them from getting into our communities and killing people. We could have new authorities to prevent the border from being overwhelmed, authorities that the President committed to using. That includes an updated asylum system with more officers to quickly screen claims. All of these things are things that my Republican colleagues have wanted for years. Arizona today has none of it. And Madam President, I think you know why. The federal government has failed Arizona on the border for decades. Sadly, it's almost expected at this point. But no past failure is as baffling and as cynical as this one. Because for once, we all agreed that the business as usual approach, it wasn't working. That our immigration process and infrastructure can't handle the new realities at the border. Because for once, there was a real plan, worked on and agreed to by Republicans and Democrats, ready to be signed into law by the president. We had an opportunity to defy the low expectations that the American people have for Congress and actually do something in a bipartisan way to start fixing the border. But that's not what happened. Senate Republicans walked away. Well, actually, they ran away from this agreement because too many politicians would just prefer to keep talking about a problem than actually solve it. This failure isn't theoretical in my state. Over the past 3 months, the Tucson sector has remained the busiest for illegal crossings in the country. Our communities and nonprofits have been stretched to the breaking point to prevent mass releases of migrants onto the streets. Border Patrol and local law enforcement, they're strained. So are ports of entry, where long wait times impact families and businesses. Did I mention that we could have had 1,000 more Border Patrol agents? 1,000. It's a difficult situation that would be more manageable if the Senate had done its job 3 months ago. That's not just me saying this. That's what you'll hear from anyone who lives or works on the border, including the Border Patrol Union. It's what I assume that my colleagues are hearing from mayors and law enforcement when they do their fact-finding missions, tours, and field hearings on the border. So, why don't we just listen to the folks that are most affected by the crisis at the border and actually do something about it? Let's pass this bipartisan border agreement. The only thing that's changed from 3 months ago is that we've wasted more time. The problem still exists. The solutions are the same ones that we negotiated together. And if you aren't convinced by every piece of it, let's debate it. And if you think it needs something added or taken away, let's vote on amendments. We just need some of our Republican colleagues to join us, and we can open up the debate on this legislation. Think about it. We can be the Senate that finally breaks through the gridlock and does something meaningful on the border. Madam President, let's defy those low expectations that the American people have for us. That's what they deserve from us. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam President. What a wonderful thought the senator from Arizona said, to defy expectations and actually get something done. You know, we have attempted so many times to do immigration reform and border security reform, and somehow it's always gotten stuck, unfortunately, over politics. And this is the moment. I was so excited when Senator Murphy and Senator Sinema and Senator Langford came together, and everyone was focused on actually negotiating a strong bipartisan bill. And unfortunately, because of politics again, it has not yet happened. Madam President, on April 2nd, Donald Trump came to Grand Rapids, Michigan, lamenting what's happening at the border and using the tragic death of a young woman who was a domestic violence victim to politicize what's happening. While he lied and said he met with the woman's family, and the family indicated he did not, He was more willing to exploit her death for his own politics than to support the passage of our strong bipartisan border bill. As we know, Republicans like to portray themselves as being the party of national security. If you want your family to be safe, then Republicans say you should vote for Republicans. Well, 98 days ago, they had a chance to boost our national security by voting for a strong border security bill written by Republicans and Democrats together. And 98 days ago, they killed the bill. And we all know why. Unfortunately, and honestly, amazingly to me, after all that incredible work to get this done, they end up voting no, they killed the bill because Donald Trump told them to. And as he was calling around, he shockingly said, just tell them, you can please blame it on me. Well, in fact, we are blaming it on him at his request because he's the one that stepped in because of politics and said, no, I don't want to solve this. I don't want to solve this. I want chaos on the border. I don't want to solve this. This will help the president or it'll help somebody else other than him. And he convinced Republicans to vote no. Madam President, Democrats want to address the challenges at the border. We know they're real. We know they're serious. We want to do the things that will make a difference. We want to give the Biden administration additional tools to solve them. And that's exactly what this legislation does. And I want to, again, say this was legislation strongly bipartisan, negotiated by Senator Murphy and Senator Langford and Senator Sinema and a group of our colleagues coming together on both sides of the aisle in good faith for months of work. And it's clear that this legislation would significantly improve our nation's security in a number of important ways. It would fix the broken asylum system we keep hearing about. It needs to be fixed. It would stop the flow of deadly fentanyl. And as I know the presiding officer knows, this is serious. It's not just at the southern border. It's in New Hampshire. It's in Michigan. It's across the country. This bill is an effective tool providing resources and technology to protect our kids, to protect people from fentanyl overdoses. It gives the president tools to manage the border. It invests in border agents and security. And the border security unions, Border Patrol unions, said, yes, this will make a difference. Please support this bill. And this union supported former President Trump, but they said, we want to fix the border. We support this bill. It is incredibly important that the tools we put in place for the president and the resources be put in place to address the issues. It's also important to note that this importantly expands legal pathways to citizenship and increases access to work authorizations. And those immigrants who serve in our military would gain quicker access to citizenship, something I think we can all agree that they've earned. So, it's important that this get done, and I would just emphasize again, it's not just about the southern border. As a northern border state in Michigan, this bill would provide up to $100 million in grants to my state, to northern states, to local and tribal law enforcement agencies to secure our country's northern border. And there's so much more in here that solves a series of problems while treating people with dignity and creating opportunity. We stand ready to pass this legislation. We are committed to border security. This is no joke. This is something that we all should come together about. And we want to keep our community safe. That's what this months-long process was all about. The serious negotiations, people working hard to come together on some really tough issues. And they did. We did. And just before we were going to vote, just before we were going to vote, Donald Trump appeared and said, wait, stop. You're not like seriously going to solve this, are you? You know, no. I want the pictures of chaos at the border. I don't want you actually governing and solving the problem. I don't want people coming together, Republicans and Democrats, and actually getting something done. But that's what we were poised to do. And 98 days ago, Republican colleagues killed the toughest border security bill in decades. We're not done. We're not giving up. We're not giving up. This is so important. We're not giving up. Our message is it's time to stop the politics. It's time to put the earplugs on when it comes to Donald Trump and focus on what really needs to get done. What's the right thing to do? It's time to fix the problems at the border, and we remain ready, willing, and able to get this done. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm honored to follow my colleagues who have spoken so powerfully on this issue, and grateful to my colleague from Connecticut for his leadership, and as well to Leader Schumer. You know, we're a nation of immigrants, proudly and gratefully. Immigrants have made this nation the greatest in the world, and yet we have a broken immigration system. And fortunately for our nation, people want to come here. Every week, I try to go to the immigration and naturalization ceremonies in my state of Connecticut. They're held in the courthouses, and I tell new citizens on those occasions that they are to be thanked for wanting to become United States citizens. They will never take it for granted. They've passed a test that most Americans couldn't pass, and they smile or laugh because they know it's true. They've already contributed to their communities. Some have served in uniform, and I look at them and I say, this is what America looks like. This is what my dad looked like in 1935 when he came to this country, speaking no English, knowing no one, having not much more than the shirt on his back. My immigrant story is not unlike many in this chamber, certainly in this nation. And this broken immigration system is unworthy of our great nation. We need to fix it. We tried with comprehensive immigration reform. In 2013, I was part of that effort and helped to write the bill that was passed overwhelmingly in the United States Senate on a bipartisan basis with support on both sides of the aisle, and never was given a vote in the House. We can do bipartisan immigration reform, and we know how to do it. In fact, Democrats and Republicans came together about 100 days ago and arrived at some solutions that put us on a path to fixing our broken border. It's not the 2013 bill because it's not comprehensive. That bill provided a path to earn citizenship for undocumented people in this country, millions of them. It provided a path for dreamers. It provided for border security, literally tens of millions of dollars and for more visas. And the bill that was negotiated 100 days ago and that should have passed 100 days ago would have begun the painstaking, laborious, difficult, complex task of immigration reform. We often hear Republicans talk about the need to secure the border. At almost every Judiciary Committee meeting that I attend, Republicans talk about the border. And they want to talk about the border so much that they actually sent us contrived articles of impeachment against a cabinet secretary for the first time in 150 years, knowing that it would go nowhere. They are making border security a political weapon. Really, it's a political stunt. And that is why they refuse to vote for the negotiated compromise that will be before us beginning tomorrow, again, and next week. The conversation on the floor tonight is a prelude to the battle that we will have again tomorrow, and I hope next week, when we will all be given a chance to go on record, and all we're asking of our Republican colleagues is that they put their votes where their mouths are. America's angry, and America should be angry about the lack of border security and about the lack of serious purpose on the part of my Republican colleagues and on their failing to do their job simply because of the political directive of one Donald Trump. It is another example of how the cult of Donald Trump has infected our political process to the grave damage and detriment of all America. Democrats spent months negotiating with Republicans and developed that compromise border bill, the strongest bill in a generation, endorsed by the National Border Patrol Council and the Union of Border Patrol Agents. And it would have reformed our asylum system, as you've heard, and empowered the president to help manage challenges at the border. But it also would have expanded work opportunities and some legal pathways to enter the United States, including Afghan nationals who assisted our armed forces, and our diplomats stood by them at grave risk to themselves. It was a tough compromise, and it limited asylum claims in ways that many Democrats and I were wary of, because it was a compromise. But as soon as the bill was released, and after it was agreed to by Republicans' chosen negotiator, the Republicans torpedoed it. And they torpedoed it for one reason: because they wanted it as a political issue. They killed the bill because Donald Trump demanded it. As we have heard tonight, Donald Trump said, "Please blame it on me." And we're here tonight to do it, because the blame is well deserved. So Trump and his allies have repeatedly shown that they prefer talk over action, that they prefer political gamesmanship over the hard work of bipartisanship on this issue. But we are not giving up. We're not going away. We're not abandoning this effort. It will continue to be our work, my life's work, as the son of an immigrant, dedicated to sensible and responsible immigration reform, comprehensive reform. This bill is not the last word, but it is a start. and we will pursue bipartisan action over political gamesmanship. Republicans need to decide if they want to take action or just continue to talk. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Madam President, I want to join the senator from Connecticut in thanking Senator Murphy for his leadership, not only in bringing this group together today, but also of this very important bill and effort to take on the issues on the border. As we face global and domestic threats, including a surge at the border, securing our borders and points of entry could not be more important. We had this opportunity to move forward in a bipartisan matter on a broad reform bill that Senators Murphy, Langford, and Sinema spent months negotiating. For those of us that had bills that were part of that effort, including the Afghan Adjustment Act, I saw firsthand the detailed work they did, the work that they did, that hard work of coming together for what is best for our country. We have seen these efforts before with immigration every time we've gotten so close. When I first got to the Senate, Senator Graham and Senator Kennedy invited me to be in the group that negotiated legislation supported by President Bush. We came so close to getting that done, comprehensive reform, which of course included funding for order at the border. We then, after that failed, we moved into President Obama's time. Again, this time it was the Senate Judiciary Committee on which I served that came together with Senator Grassley's support, Senator Leahy's, and reached an agreement, passed it through the Senate, and then it failed over in the House of Representatives. Time 3 was when Senator Round, Senator Kaine, many of us came together. I remember Senator Collins' office was the place of the meeting. I believe the presiding officer was part of that too. And we reached an agreement. We had enough votes. And then unfortunately, President Trump gut-punched the people in his own party and came out against the bill. Again, significant funding for order at the border, significant work that would have been done to allow people to seek citizenship who have been here for years, many who know no other country like the Dreamers. This bill that was negotiated came with incredible headwinds that they were up against. It would have fixed the asylum system. It would have given the president emergency powers to shut the border down when needed. It also would have invested in hiring more Border Patrol agents and immigration judges while giving law enforcement the tools and technology they need to secure our borders. As the presiding officer knows, strengthening our border security means investing in both our southern and our northern borders. And I note that Senator Stabenow of Michigan also touched on this very important issue. America shares the longest border in the world with the country of Canada. It stretches over 5,500 miles, and more than 400,000 people and $2 billion in goods and services cross it every day. A strong northern border is critical for maintaining our trade relationships with Canada and the world. As I like to say, in Minnesota, we can see Canada from our porch, and they are our closest trading partner. I just met with a number of leaders in Parliament, the Canadian Parliament today. But that border is also critical for our national security. We know that more people on the terrorist screening database attempt to enter the U.S. through Canada than through Mexico. And we have witnessed terrible instances of drug smuggling and human trafficking across this border. Like so many others, I was horrified and heartbroken when a family of 4 froze to death in a blizzard at the Minnesota-Canada border just 2 years ago in an incident related to human smuggling. That's why we must ensure that federal, state, and local officials have the information and resources they need to protect our northern border. And when there are issues at the southern border, they often rely on Customs, as the presiding officer knows, and others to come down from northern border offices, and that creates its own set of issues. That's why this negotiations that Senators Murphy and Langford and Senator Sinema, with strong support from Senator Schumer, engaged in, and this product of a bill was so important, and that's why I supported it. Beyond addressing the situations at both the northern and southern borders, the Border Act would expand legal pathways by including 250,000 new family and employment visas over the next 5 years. These visas would go a long way toward filling worker shortages in my state, and I know in yours, to the presiding officer, that are impacting businesses in my home state, impacting farmers, hospitality, hospitals, clinics, and the like. This bill also included the Afghan Adjustment Act with some changes that had been suggested by a number of Republican senators that we included. That bill would have been a savior. There are 80,000 Afghans here, so many of whom helped our troops. Major priority for the American Legion, major priority for the VFW, and they now have a trapdoor under them. They don't know whenever they could be sent back to the Taliban. Yet these are people we made a covenant to, and just like after the Vietnam War, we kept that covenant. We kept that covenant with those that stood with us. We must keep that covenant again. That's why senators like Senator Graham, who is the lead sponsor of that bill with me, along with Senator Moran, the head of the ranking member of Veterans Services. Senator Risch is on the bill from Foreign Relations. We have support from Senator Mullen on that bill. Senator Wicker is on that bill. It is an incredible group of Republican and Democratic co-sponsors, and I thank Senator Murphy, Senator Langford, and Sinema for their work to incorporate it into the bill, strongly supported by the Chamber of Commerce as well. So the bill not only included the work that I just mentioned on the border and on some of these other very important issues, the bill also would have made a major effort in taking on fentanyl by strengthening our borders. We did make progress on border security with legislation that was signed into law last month as part of the National Security Package, the Fend Off Fentanyl Act. This critical legislation, championed by our colleagues, Senator Sherrod Brown and Tim Scott, declares fentanyl trafficking a national emergency and imposes tough new sanctions on fentanyl traffickers, from the chemical suppliers in China to the Mexican cartels that traffic the drugs into our country. We also recently provided funding for Customs and Border Protection to detect and seize fentanyl and other narcotics at our ports of entry. These are important steps in the right direction, but there's so much more to do. Law enforcement officers across my state and our country must be very concerned about this every day. One seizure actually of fentanyl was enough to kill every single person in Hennepin County, our most populous county. In Minnesota alone, fentanyl is involved in 92% of opioid deaths. Just last month, police in my husband's hometown of Mankato arrested 6 suspected drug dealers and seized almost 6,000 pills laced with fentanyl. And earlier this year, Minnesota's U.S. Attorney, Andy Lugar, announced that law enforcement busted a Twin Cities drug ring and seized over 30,000 grams of fentanyl pills. That's enough to kill everyone in our state, with over 5 million people, more than 2 times over. These aren't just numbers. Each of those pills could kill one of our friends and neighbors, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. I'm thinking about Devin Noring from Hastings, Minnesota. Devin was struggling with dental pain and migraines, so he bought what he thought was Percocet over Snapchat to deal with the pain. But it wasn't really Percocet. It was laced with fentanyl, and it immediately killed him. He was only 19. One pill can kill, and every pill we keep out of our country represents a potential life saved. That's why we have passed this legislation, but I join my colleagues and will continue to advocate for the Bipartisan Border Act. Why? More funding for cutting-edge technology to intercept fentanyl, more secure border, more order at the border. We need this at the southern border as well as the northern border. Next week, I hope we will have an opportunity to take action on this bill. We have worked on this bill for months, making changes from multiple senators from both parties. At this point, there shouldn't be any controversy about what's in the bill. People have had plenty of time to read it. They've had plenty of time to see the support from groups like the conservative union of the border agents at the border. They've had plenty of time to see the support that the bill has from so many groups across the country. They have had plenty of time to hear about the horror stories like the ones I just mentioned on fentanyl, and they have plenty of time to gotten to the place that enough about politics, enough about finger pointing. Let us pass this bipartisan border bill to make our country safer. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Madam President, let me thank my colleagues for coming to the floor tonight to reinforce the opportunity that we have. I think we've gotten used to immigration being a perpetual political football in this country. It almost feels and seems unsolvable, that it's just a subject for campaign ads, for cable news shows, for fundraising emails. It doesn't have to be that way. We could choose to make progress. We could choose to pass legislation that treats migrants a little bit more humanely, that gives a pathway for individuals like those Afghan partners to be able to become United States citizens, and give the president updated powers at the border to make sure that we're doing immigration at the southwest border in a humane, orderly way. That is not impossible. In fact, it's more possible than ever before, because a group of senators sat in a room for 4 months in good faith and hashed out a compromise that involves a lot of Republican priorities, a lot of Democratic priorities, that's endorsed by the progressive-leaning immigration lawyers group and the conservative-leaning Border Patrol union, that's endorsed by the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. I know we're not used to finding common ground on immigration. It seems to happen only once a decade, but we found it. We found it. And I'm going to be reintroducing this bill because I believe that there's a chance Republicans will choose to do the right thing. I get it. The border being a mess is good politics for Republicans. I get it. Keeping this problem unsolved might provide an advantage for Republicans in this next election. But we don't go into this business to win elections, to just put our name on the door. Senator Lankford said it on this floor. He said every one of us is given a pen. Every one of us has a unique ability to make law to make the country better. What's the point, Senator Lankford said, of having this job if you're just going to do press conferences, if you're not going to actually engage in the hard work of compromise to make this country better and safer? That's what we did. Senator Lankford, Senator Sinema, myself, Senator Schumer, Senator McConnell, we sat in a room for 4.5 months. We forged a compromise that unquestionably will bring order to the southwest border. And because of that, Donald Trump is telling Republicans, ditch it, vote no. We don't want there to be order at the southwest border because that would be bad politics for us. What's the point of having this job if you aren't willing to make tough compromises that make this country better? And so I understand there may be long odds to convincing Republicans to change their vote. I understand that because this bill is a compromise, there will be some Democrats who will vote against it. But I think this is so important. I take Republicans at their word that it's an emergency to make sense of what's happening at the border, that it's worth it to bring this bill back before the floor. I hope our leadership will decide to schedule a vote on this bill. I will introduce the bill imminently, I think with many of my colleagues supporting it, and I'm deeply grateful to many of my friends in the Democratic caucus for underscoring the importance of bringing order to the southwest border, to investing in border security, to supporting our migrant communities as the bipartisan border security bill does. I yield the floor.